Hello, friends, and welcome to this week's episode of We Used to Be Journos. I am Jan Fran. I used to be a journo, but now I think you'll find I'm a media mogul.
Wow,
Yes.
big week.
It's been a huge week. And yesterday, last week rather, I said that we were unemployed.
Yeah.
This week, madam, we are media moguls.
Yeah, meteoric rise. We are still number one in Apple News, which is epic. We're trending in Spotify, and heaps of people are on YouTube watching our mugs for the whole hour. So
Yes.
thank you.
And sticking around, which has surprised me. You're there for the entirety of the show.
Yeah. Honestly, the reviews are making me cry, and it's both touching. I don't know if it's that it's touching or that I'm deeply traumatized, but probably a little bit of both.
Well, that does sound like a Venn diagram that you would sit
Smack bam.
in the middle of
Yeah.
Antoinette Lattouf, exactly. To all of the people that have subscribed and that have supported us already, I mean, we cannot thank you enough. We're so buoyed by it. We are a very, very small team that makes this show and that runs our Instagram account and that does all of the other things that one must do to run
media moguls.
As media moguls. Media mogul, singular, probably. But, you know, building a business takes a lot of work and we want to grow and we want to scale. So if you want to help us out, please subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to this on or watching this on. And, of course, you can head over to etmedia.com and subscribe with your dollars because that makes the biggest difference to us. And we would so greatly appreciate that. That is out of the way. Tell us what's on the show today, Antoinette.
So in the second half of the show, it is a big and I'm going to say quite excellent chat.
We haven't had it yet.
Well, I'm prefacing it because I just know I'm aiming high, right? We are media moguls. The chat's excellent.
She's a good
great.
promoter, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
We're going to examine if we are still journalists, if we consider ourselves journalists, because obviously the name of the podcast is We Used to Be Journos, and that has raised a lot of questions and confusion within ourselves and others, but also why we decided we needed to go independent. And we will share all of that with you, including our daily existential crisis.
Yes, it is going to be a bit of a personal segment, I think, the latter half of the show. But before we get to that, we've got the It's a No From Me segment where each of us bring something from the media that we think absolutely flunks the pub test, or our test, actually, which is maybe more stringent than the pub test because
I
we're
suspect so.
Yeah, sober and...
Well, you are, yeah.
Are you drunk at 11 a.m.?
We will find out. I did say existential crisis, trauma and crying all in the first few minutes.
You did. Before we jump to those segs, It's a No From Me, our big conversation, and then lastly, a little shout out to the folks that we think are doing it well. Before we get to all of that, you might have noticed that we did not have a tagline for the opening of this show. We used to be journos. Insert tagline here because we don't have one. We haven't quite settled on one, but we did put a call out.
Well, I did initially like We Used to Be journos, but now we just bitch about them, kidding kind of. And you were like, no, that's showing our hand too much, Antoinette.
No, I mean yes, we used to be journos. Now we just bitch about them. It's not quite right because we don't just bitch about other journalists. I mean, we do, but off camera, off mic.
Yeah. You know? Sometimes on mic, sometimes on mic.
But that's not the main aim of the show.
Okay.
You know, it's media literacy, it's media critique, it's kind of analysis of the way in which the news is covered, what's wrong with it, what's right with it, all of these sorts of things. Anyway, we put the call out to our beloved listeners as to what our tagline for this podcast should be. And you have delivered. You've come back
so good
with a few. Here's one. We used to be journos. We can't believe this podcast needs to exist in 2025 either.
Yeah, that's a good one. We used to be journos. You can't whitewash genocide.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's...
I feel like the algorithm won't like that one.
No. You know what? Let's leave that as an option.
Leave that, yeah.
But we won't take that as the number one option. I like this one. We used to be journos exposing the bullshit.
And that's a play on our name, ETTE. Very clever. Probably going to confuse people who think we can't spell. Like we used to be journos. If we spell bullshit that way, then maybe we'd never deserve to be journos. I don't know, just putting it out there. Remus says, we used to be journos. Matter. MATA. Make Australians think again.
Oh, okay.
I like that one,
bit
Remus.
of a MAGA play. I don't want to invoke Donald Trump in any way,
Fair
though. We used to be journos. Le too fast, le too furious.
I think that has something to do with the car. I think that has something to do with the car.
I mean, you are furious.
But I am not fast. If anyone has seen how I drive,
Yeah,
not fast.
no, you sound
Anna says, we used to be journos. Now we dismember the legacy media.
Ooh.
It's a bit violent, but I don't hate it.
No, I'm gonna go no on the dismember.
Okay.
I like this one. I genuinely like this one. Mars. Hello, Mars. Thank you for sending this one through. We used to be journos, breaking down broken news.
Okay, I think that might be a winner. If we were Kiwis, Hakeem's suggestion, report with attitude. E-double-T-E.
Can you just do that Kiwi accent again, please?
Report with attitude. So far, I think it's breaking down broken news.
You think? Breaking down broken news. We used to be journos. Breaking down broken news. Mars, good on you. Whoever,
Yeah.
I mean, you get nothing for giving us that tagline, but I think you're in the top spot. All right, let's see. Let's see if we add it to the tail end next week.
I would love to go first with It's a No from me, if you don't mind, because we had so many people get in touch with us about this particular Today Show segment. And I went back and found it. It was last Thursday, the 17th. And it was pretty easy to find. I'll tell you why, Jan, because people were sending screen grabs, time codes, and general fury. And firstly, shout out to our many unofficial producers and researchers out there.
I really love that we have this sort of crew of people that are sourcing videos and time coding videos and sending them to us, and it's all right. Good on you, Eterati.
Eterati.
That's what we're going to call you.
I love it. It was a segment with National Senator Bridget McKenzie and the Labor member for Hunter, Dan Repacoli, and it was with Carl Stefanovic on the Today Show. It's a bit of like brekkie sparring, and it's moderated by, well, I'm not actually quite sure who was moderating, so let's take a listen.
Jason Clare's revealed he won't take action against anti-Semitism until we have a special envoy on Islamophobia. Bridget?
Yeah, this is outrageous, Carl. We've got Jewish Australians, synagogues being torched. We've got our academics, students and researchers being harassed on our universities, and we've got our artists and musicians being cancelled. The report is sitting on the desk. It has a suite of initiatives to get moving on this stuff. Enough of the nice words, Prime Minister. This has been a long time. You don't have any excuse now not to act and to play domestic politics in Western Sydney by sitting at the anti-Semitism report, which has clear actions on your desk, and to wait for a report on Islamophobia. And let's face it, mosques aren't being torched in the same rate. Muslim kids and academics and researchers aren't being cancelled and harassed at workplaces in the same way that Jewish Australians are. And let's look at what this guy does, not what he says.
Okay, Dan, fair cop there?
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to say, not fair cop, Carl. And I've got 3 reasons, or 3 ways as a journalist, I reckon, or as a moderator, he missed a few opportunities. But I'm going to preface it by saying, so by now, at that point of the debate, the report had been widely scrutinised and condemned, including by some Jewish groups, media scholars, people in the university sector, a whole bunch of people raising the alarm that this is McCarthyism, an absolute overreach, lacking any real detail, big on rhetoric, and kind of light on evidence. So there was a lot of questions raised about the veracity of the claims, but also the lack of detail, given just how much power this the envoy is calling for. And also, as we talked about in last week's episode, Gillian Siegel, who was a lobbyist for a pro-Israel group just before getting the envoy job, her husband's family trust donated money to that very racist right
Yeah,
group. So like all of this is
this
now
was out there.
well and truly out there. So
Yeah.
Carl could have contextualised that as a presenter. But that's not even my main point. I want to speak more specifically to the falsehoods that were put out there by the national senator. So she talks about Jewish synagogues being torched. And now there's no denying that these attacks are frightening and worrying. And in terms of attacks on places of worship, which everyone will agree about, I don't think anybody is here to dispute that. Late last year, there was a priest stabbed at a church in southwestern Sydney. Just last week in Adelaide, a pastor was forced to tackle a man who pulled a knife on a parishioner. That barely made a headline, nor did the vandalism caught on CCTV of a mosque in Adelaide. That was last month.
Right. So
there are attacks in places of worship, violent attacks in places of worship that don't get anywhere as many headlines. And I think for the Nationals senator to be like, well, things aren't being torched, like, well, things are happening in other places of worship. We just are barely covering it. You'd be lucky for it to be covered in the local news bulletin in Adelaide.
Right. So it's a question of what is getting prominence in media coverage.
Yeah, I think that it raises really important questions about that. When she said to play domestic politics in Western Sydney by letting the anti-Semitism report, which is clear action, sit on your desk and to wait for a report on Islamophobia. I have this real issue with the way this unfolding genocide is being reduced to Islamophobia and attacks on Jewish
and anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
They're presented as this very kind of as a binary, as though they happen kind of separately. One happens in this corner of the world, one happens in this corner of the world.
Yeah,
they're two separate things.
And I just think it's so like morally and intellectually dishonest and also blatantly untrue. Like there's an abject failure to acknowledge anti-Israel sentiment because of their military actions, and that it's not just Muslim people that are upset about it or Jewish people that are upset about it. It's just people with a heart and a conscience are upset about it, who many don't even identify with a religion. So reducing this, or not even talking about what might be driving anti-Israel sentiment, not even talking about it, I just think it's so dishonest.
Yeah, I mean, the report that they're talking about specifically, the critics of the report, which you alluded to earlier, there are many, say that it conflates anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism, and they're not the same thing. And an Australian court recently ruled that. And so I think there's probably some a missed opportunity there to speak to something that is relevant, which is this anger that exists in the community. Is it anti-Semitism or is it anti-Israel? Is it railing against the actions of the Israeli military?
Yeah, the daily murder of children, collective punishment, starvation as a tool of war, bombing schools, hospitals. Like none of it in this 5 or so minute debate was any of that canvassed or touched on. The other point that
I have a point
me.
to make about all of this. I'm gonna let you say all of the things and then we come back to it.
This is my third point, but I think this is one of the most important points. This is the point that really irked me. Muslim kids and academics and researchers aren't being cancelled and harassed at workplaces in the same way that Jewish Australians are. That goes back to that false binary. But also, where is the evidence? And look at the most high-profile cases in Australia of people who have been sacked, punished, cancelled. Myself.
Not Muslim,
Lebanese Christian. Jason Gillam.
Not Muslim or Arab.
Anglo-British Australian guy. Karen Wild, First Nations academic. So many Australian women, Anglo women who are influencers or small business owners. And in my inbox, I cannot even keep up with an amount of people on LinkedIn and in my inbox who are teachers, who are dentists, who are healthcare workers, who are all being punished or have been stood down for voicing concern about what's happening in Palestine. So if there is this myriad of examples that Bridget McKenzie, pray tell, give us one.
Yeah.
Give us two. And why hasn't Stefanovic said, well, hold a second, because all of the big ones that have either before the courts or have made headlines are people who are voicing concern about an unfolding genocide. Like that statement is blatantly untrue and it needs to be challenged, and it just wasn't.
Well, you would think that the role of the journalist and the presenter in a situation like this is to press the politician on what they say, which is to kind of tease out the details of, okay, you make a statement like that, well, who are you talking about? How many are you talking about? How do you know that?
How do you know this?
How do you know this? Where is the evidence? That's kind of the main question. I think, though, he just handballed the entire thing back to the Labor guy, right?
Yes.
I'm curious as to let's just have a listen as to what Dan Rapopoli came back with.
Remember, the question was fair cop, Dan.
Anti-Semitism has no right in this country, has no place in this country whatsoever. And Bridget will say what she wants to say there, right? But this should not be happening. This should not be happening in this country to start with.
So
we live in
wait.
Australia, we live in the best country in the world. So we're going to continue to work and make sure that we're doing the right thing to put all Australians in the safest place we can. We know this shouldn't be happening, and we'll continue to work to make sure that this doesn't happen.
Why wait for another report?
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
So Carl seems capable of questioning and following up, because he said, why wait 3 times? So if he wants to get an answer, he's clearly capable of pressing a point. It's just peculiar which point it is he wants to press, because it seems that his point is very much in line with the National Senator, going, we should just ignore all the evidence and the warnings. Let's continue with this binary. Let's not fact check anything Bridget McKenzie said and be like, why wait, hysteria.
I mean, I think there was probably an onus of responsibility on old mate Dan to come back with a lot of this context, right?
But you think it's incumbent on him or the journalist who's just allowing things to fly completely untested?
So there's a couple of things going on, and here's kind of what I'll say about this, right? I think we can't overlook the format of these sorts of things when we talk about, whose role is what, because I find these formats like quite tired and tiring to watch. And actually, for the most part, they tend to be journalism free, because the presenter, in a format like this where you've got someone from this side of politics and someone from that side of politics, the presenter or the journalist kind of takes on the role of referee. Which is kind of just to sort of shepherd people in and out, right? Not entirely, but the thing rests on the performance of the politician. And these sort of interviews, if you look at them as like a testing ground or a training ground for politicians, more than any kind of like truth-telling apparatus, because you will have parties who will say, oh, okay, we need to do this interview with the Today Show. Who are we going to put up? Let's put up our best guy, or let's put up our new guy and give him a bit of, training in the ring and see how he comes out of it, right? And so if you're a politician doing one of these things, you get briefed on what to say. You get told, you're in the ring, you're going on the Today Show, you've got your political opponent opposite you, so make sure you hit this point, this point, this point, this point, and basically land the blow. Like, that's what you're there to do. You're not there to have a conversation, you're not there to have a dialogue, you're not there to do any of these things that kind of get us closer to the truth. So in a format like that, you can't really expect...
I see where you're going, and I disagree. Like, you can't expect the moderator to do their job or to do anything, to be like, well, they've got their talking points, they're just going to shout at each other.
I think the viewers should just realise that this type of format is just not any kind of, as I said, truth-telling mechanism. It's a form of entertainment, and everybody has a particular role in this. I personally don't find it particularly entertaining. I don't know who finds it particularly entertaining at the hour of the morning that it plays.
7:45 a.m.
At 7:45 a.m. But if you see it as like a mechanism for politicians to just essentially land a blow on each other, it kind of takes the potency away from it. You feel like you're just watching this like B-grade boxing match that you could probably stand to do without, to be honest.
I just think those blows can land and it can still be this kind of sparring match and there be a semblance of truth or journalistic rigour. I still think it can be that entertainment of going, well, you're not doing enough. Each side of politics is going to tell the other side that they're not doing enough, and call, particularly if you're in opposition, and call for the party to do more or for the policy failure. But there, it just felt like truth just went to die.
Yeah, it did.
At 7:45 a.m. on Thursday morning.
Yeah, it did, because it's not there to like live. It's not really about the truth. It's just about the performance of those two people. And when those the earpieces come out of your ear and you're like, okay, we're off. The victor goes, oh, well, I nailed that. But to what end? Like a frayed national discourse.
Okay.
Anyway,
so it's a no from me. I expect it from you.
Well, it's a no from you, but I think it's a format problem as much as it is a Carl, Bridget, and Dan problem. So it's a no from me this week. So there were a few examples that I spotted over the course of the week, and generally for this seg, like I like to bring one thing, that's the idea, and try and pick it apart. But then the news broke on Monday of the highest number of Palestinians slaughtered in a single day while seeking aid. And I just descended into the abyss.
Yes.
As I do.
I tried to pull you out with minimal luck.
With minimal effort. Yeah.
No, a lot of effort, minimal luck.
Sorry, that's true. A lot of effort. Yep. Minimal bang for your buck because I'm still there. Yeah. And part of what I think just spins me out when we hear of absolutely horrible stories coming out of Gaza is just the kind of dissonance between what I see on my phone and what I either don't see or I see in the mainstream media. And this is where I think it's like, what is reality? Like, in what reality am I living? And often when like these stories happen, people say, oh, I'm seeing all this stuff coming through my phone and the mainstream media is just not reporting it. So I conducted a little experiment.
Okay.
And I can tell you that in this instance, around this story, the mainstream media did report it. And I'm talking all of the outfits.
Okay.
Right? I'm trying to be diplomatic in how I say it.
No, just say it.
Okay. My takeaway is when something happens in Gaza and it's not reported, it's fucked. When something happens in Gaza and it is reported, it's fucked.
Yeah, okay. So that's the good news, the bad news and the good news. And it sounds very similar.
All of the news.
Yeah.
So this story was reported. It was reported on the Sydney Morning Herald. It was reported on The Age. It was reported on The Guardian. It was reported on the ABC. And it was reported on SBS. And I made sure that I checked them all round about the same time, which was 3 p.m. Monday, about 24 hours after the incident, I'm doing incident in air quotes, has happened, right? These were all very similar versions of the one story. They were taken from the wires. The wires are Associated Press and Reuters.
It's like wholesale news that you subscribe to.
Yeah, for those that don't know what it is. They kind of just led with the latest, the number of people killed. The top line was, Palestinians killed seeking aid. And they were buried within the various websites. There was not a single one of them that had it as the lead. ABC had it like in the middle of its news website. Various others had it in like the world section. So there was no major prominence given to it.
And I'm just scouring some of these headlines. I can't see anywhere where it is contextualized as the deadliest day. It is this many killed, waiting for food.
Yeah.
It's just like another day, some more Palestinians killed.
Another day, another thing, which to me speaks to like the normalization of this story. Like I checked the Daily Mail, wasn't expecting to find anything, believe it or not. They did have a story. Do you know where they had it?
I know, next to a Kardashian story.
Dude, do you know how far I had to... I scrolled so far that I could scroll no more.
Oh my gosh, RIP your mental health.
Have you ever scrolled the Daily Mail? Like,
no,
girl, it is a long scroll.
Yeah.
Like, it is a long scroll down, baby. And I got down to the very end and there was that one story, which again was a similar-ish story to all of the others. The West Australian had one story in a sidebar. And what stood out to me was that it was in the world section. There were 4 other stories ahead of it, including that the German backpacker that had been found
a few weeks ago
was back in Germany. That was the number one story in the world section of the West Australian within 24 hours of this absolute horror. The Oz, Lord have mercy.
No mercy.
Lord have no mercy.
No mercy. Thank you. Yeah.
The Oz had the story in its world section, an image of 2 distressed Palestinians. Do you know what the headline was?
I don't know. They did it to themselves or something?
No, the headline, and remember, this is the single deadliest day for Palestinians seeking aid, period. Amid the horror of everything that we have witnessed over the last few months. The Australian's headline was, IDF draws up plan to take over Gaza Strip.
Those motherfuckers. Sorry, there's no other way to respond to that.
I was also a little bit in some level of disbelief about that headline as well. But there you go. So you get this kind of normalization of an incident, and I keep calling it an incident. I don't even know what to call it.
Like, you've just read incident that many times. Now you have been, you're now using the sanitary language because you spent a long time reading the headlines.
Slaughter, You get a normalization of the slaughter. You get a sanitization of the slaughter. You don't get any prominence of the slaughter on any of the websites. There's no like additional pieces. Usually when there's a big story, you get a number of kind of additional pieces that speak to the personal angle, a human story, whatever it is. None of that. And in the worst case scenario, it's a story that actually just comes second to Israeli strategy. Israeli strategy, plans to take over Gaza, that's the most prominent thing.
What stood out to me, though, was UNRWA put out a statement, and that's the main aid provider in Gaza. So obviously the sense of urgency and horror is not just being shown in the images we're seeing on social media. It's in the language coming out from human rights organisations. So its Commissioner General described the aid distribution scheme as a sadistic death trap, where, also to quote, snipers fire randomly on crowds and also are given a license to kill in inverted commas. So he called it a massive hunt of people. So there were so many words that could have been used, which in journalism makes your job easier. You just grab a bit from a human rights organisation or an aid organisation and say, sadistic death trap, 85 killed in Palestine, a massive hunt of people, most Palestinians killed in one day.
Well, let me tell you what the ABC went with, because I also watched all of the news bulletins, except for Channel 10. I watched 7, 9, ABC and SBS, and you've just mentioned UNRWA there, calling it a massive hunt of people.
And a sadistic death trap.
Listen to that language, right? The ABC, on its background screen when it was introducing the story, called what UNRWA called a massive hunt of people, the ABC called convoy crossfire.
Oh, that's just so dishonest. That is so dishonest.
Isn't that just like crossfire?
It suggests there are two parties firing at each other, not people starving people queuing for food.
Who else is firing?
But who wrote that and who approved it? For it to be on the plasma, it goes through multiple hands. This isn't you can't blame some newbie who didn't know what they were doing. There are multiple people who have to approve that process before it ends up on the screen, and then it's shown on the screen, and then it's filmed on the screen. Like, there are just so many hands that has passed through to allow that to happen. It was not an accident.
No, it was definitely not an accident. And, 9 had the story, 7 had the story, SBS had the story, ABC had the story. Again, they were sort of these quite, in my view, rote stories, in the sense that they were almost identical in their structure. You had a repetition of voices that had come through the wires, again, because a lot of these places rely on the wires to get their sourcing. So you end up with the same people in...
no foreign independent journalists are allowed into Gaza, something that has not happened in any conflict around the world in living memory.
Indeed, absolutely that's the case. But again, with these stories, the Israeli denial is very prominent. If it's not in the intro, it's definitely in the first half of the story. And in a number of these stories, SBS and 7, you had the only mother in the story was an Israeli mother who is sitting in her home and who is talking about her son who is a kidnapped hostage. And so you have this kind of the person that you relate to the most.
The
humanizing is an Israeli. In the midst, remember, I always bring it back to the single deadliest day for starving Palestinians seeking aid. And I just want to play a little bit for you. And okay, I'm not gonna say anything, but you just tell me what your feeling is when you kind of hear the story. So this is just the opening of the Channel 7 story from Monday.
Each day in Gaza, many of the people who queue for flour leave in an ambulance.
Right?
The people? Why are they in an ambulance? Who are the people? And are they just going for a joyride in an ambulance?
I mean, but also like the kind of the affected voice, like in Gaza, many of the people flee in an ambulance. It's like it just sounds like you're sort of just putting on this presentation, whereas I've just come from my Instagram account where I've just seen a video, black, you don't see anything, and the only thing you hear is the sound of a baby crying from hunger. You see what I'm saying about like the dissonance And then you go and watch a 7 story and you hear this like affected voice, trying to open with a one-liner, as news reporters tend to do. And there's just, you've just come from like the most devastating thing that you've seen on social media that you've been able to kind of like connect with to this very kind of sanitized, dry retelling. You get the sense that when you watch these stories and you read them on the website, like comparative to when you see them on social media, you get the sense that on via mainstream media, there's 2 sides. It's a conflict. You see the mother of one of the hostages just equated with hundreds and thousands of Palestinian people. You don't get a sense of urgency. You don't get a sense of the scale of the horror. You don't get a sense of the human lives. Again, I come back to that video of like the baby crying. You don't get that sense at all. You don't get a sense that this is part of something bigger, that it's part of something that has been credibly called a genocide by any scholar and humanitarian organization worth its salt. You get no sense of that. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make is you do get a sense of that on social media.
And you're not going mad. If you feel like you're going mad, like I'm seeing this devastation, I am heartbroken, I cannot believe this immense human suffering deliberately and strategically inflicted on people is happening. And then you flick on the news or you open a newspaper, you just like, am I losing my bloody mind? Like, what the hell is happening?
And you're not losing your bloody mind. And you can see the way in which, like, when it's, as I said, like when it's not reported, it's fucked. But when it's reported, it's also fucked.
But Jan, it's been 19 months of this. For the first few months, you'll be like, oh, they're using 2003 Iraq war tactics that, haven't caught up to the digital age. Well, what is it going to take for media outlets to go, audiences are calling bullshit?
Yeah, that's right.
What's it going to take?
Yeah, maybe more and more audiences calling bullshit. And at the very least, like, maybe I don't have the solution to all of this because it's such a fundamentally, it's a foundational problem. But for the love of God, can you not call it convoy crossfire?
Just at the very least.
Just start there.
Yeah.
Can we start there? This kind of reporting that sort of sanitizes all of this, normalizes all of this, it sort of just runs for cover, runs cover for our government to then do not very much.
Yes, and speaking of not very much, overnight, our PM joined other world leaders in writing a joint statement calling for an end to what is happening. And honestly, I can't keep up. This is probably statement 246 of not much, but, at first deeply concerned, and now we're more deeply concerned, and now we are very, very deeply concerned, but very little in the way of actions. Like, whereas Canada, France and the UK have threatened sanctions, like they're not imposing sanctions, but they're threatening sanctions. And I just saw one article in the ABC about this, and I just thought at this God knows what number of vague, loosely worded statement that the PM, the lip service to kind of justice and international law, was there any sense of, just another statement, but this falls short of applying for sanctions, other countries are going further. The second line in summary for the ABC was the Australia has joined all of these other countries. The second line was, Israel denies it and says it's Hamas's fault. It's like, is that really where we're at now? Still where we're at. Not, this is just another word salad from the PM with no concrete actions. Or the PM has signed a statement but won't impose sanctions and refuses to expel the Israeli ambassador and still hasn't ruled out sending military parts to Israel.
Yeah.
Like, where is the analysis in journalism?
I mean,
I'm asking you a lot of questions and I'm asking you to solve it all. Sorry, Jan.
I was going to say, maybe it's coming, but also maybe it's not coming. Maybe it's not coming. We don't know. I think this deference to Israel is something that we need to take a much deep, like that's an episode in and of itself.
Yes.
The constant deference to the Israeli perspective, as you say, 20 months into, what's been credibly called a genocide. But that said, that is my...
No.
That's my no from me. It was a little bit more of a PowerPoint presentation this week, but I think it just needed to be. Okie dokie.
Well, we did think we need to have, we don't think we're being honest enough with you, with our dear listeners. So we're going to be a little bit more honest. We're going to be honest with where we're at. Are we still journalists?
Yes, why we decided to go independent. And this is a conversation that we figured we just should do early in the pod. Like, this is really only episode 4 for us.
Yeah.
And we kind of just wanted to set a bit of a scene early as to, where we're at and how we're thinking about ourselves and where we would place ourselves in, the
ecosystem.
The ecosystem of Australian journalism, if you will. So I guess the question is like, and this is a lot of our listeners have kind of pushed back on this idea of like, we used to be journos. I get a lot of people in my DM saying, but you still are a journo.
Yeah, I get a lot of like, you're my favourite journalist and Jan is my second favourite journalist.
Oh.
No, I just made that one up.
No one would say that. So I guess the question is like, are we still journos?
Look, of course we are. This is a tongue-in-cheek, the title of our podcast. But we did step away from straight news reporting. Like, a lot of people think of journalism, they think of kind of the news of the day. And in the past 5 or so years, even though we have had those roles across various outlets, I was doing a lot more commentary, doing freelance work, you were doing comedy. I started to dabble into satire and, speaking gigs, and wrote a book. And so, yes, we are journalists, but we haven't worked in straight newsrooms for some years. So that's kind of where we were at before October 2023. We had kind of what we call like a portfolio career, which sounds like really wanky. But that's what we were doing.
But I think the coverage of Gaza and, what happened October 7 and then post October 7, in terms of how that was covered, was probably one of the reasons that certainly I wanted to take a bit of a step back from working in a newsroom. And for me, like, covering Israel-Palestine is a story like no other.
Yeah.
It has no precedent in the way that it's covered in newsrooms. And I just knew that there was going to be added surveillance. I knew that there was going to be unilateral decision making. I knew that there was going to be an extreme focus on language. You can use this word, but you can't use this word.
A huge fear of lobbyists, the pressure they exert on your employer, which we obviously found out in my case. We knew all of those things, and now it's been proven.
Yes. So I had this kind of inkling that, even like the sort of faux balance that you're kind of forced to engage in. If you do an interview with a Palestinian person, you have to do an interview with an Israeli person. They both have to be live. They both have to be the same duration. Everything sort of has to mirror each other, even when the reality on the ground is wildly and widely disproportionate. And then, of course, there was like the viewing of Arab... I'm not going to say this wasn't a factor, because it was a factor. Like the viewing of Arab journalists with a degree of suspicion.
No.
Can you believe?
Oh, I cannot believe it.
Which is something that I've kind of have always just low level felt, especially when it comes to the reporting of the Middle East, which is that you can't really be trusted to be objective and impartial. You're too emotional and too close. And you have a vested interest in a way that the rest of the newsroom doesn't. All of these things. I was like, fuck that noise. I do not want to be a part of that.
And broadly seeing, obviously, Australian Arab journalists as lesser than or worthy of your suspicion. But seeing our Palestinian journalists killed and so little coverage or care amongst our peers here. So at the Walkley Awards last year, the Walkley Awards are the journalism night of nights. Nobody mentioned that almost 200 Palestinian journalists have been killed. And I just thought, well, firstly, I'm glad I wasn't in that room on that night, because I would have just absolutely been livid. But how many Palestinian journalists does it take to be killed for an Australian media outlet to spend some time humanising, naming them? How many of our peers could name at least one of those journalists or the circumstances in which they were killed? Just last week, Zaha Saleh on July 17 was killed. He went to report on that last remaining Catholic church that had been bombed. And then it was bombed and killed there. Radio silence.
Yeah. And, you have to remember, like, journalists tend not to want to like weigh in on various issues. Like some of them are like, well, our opinions don't really matter and we shouldn't be speaking on, we shouldn't have thoughts about certain situations or whatever.
Let the facts speak for themselves then.
Sure, there's that. But also if you wanted to, not have an opinion on certain things, fine, that's your prerogative. However, the one opinion that journalists should have is to advocate for other journalists.
Yeah, if you don't want to say anything else about anything,
don't worry about it.
Cool. Just quote the Committee to Protect Journalists. Just put a photo and a name up of the latest journalist killed, because as a journalist, caring about your peer does not render you not neutral, objective, trustworthy, and all those things.
Like, I just want to give an example of like French journalists. French journalists got together and staged a massive protest over the slaughtered journalists in Gaza. So this idea that like, oh no, we can't possibly weigh in, we can't possibly be advocates, we can't possibly be activists. It's like, you can.
No, and
it's done in various parts of the world. You just don't want to. You've just chosen
cowardly.
not to.
It's just cowardly. I feel this like enormous level of betrayal and abandonment, Jan. Like, do you feel that?
I mean, I do. I do feel that, and I have to reckon with that, to be honest, because it's such a like I've spoken before about the feeling of contempt that I have for various institutions, including the institution of journalism, and I don't like walking through the world with a lens of contempt. I don't like it. I think contempt is very toxic and porous and destructive, and
that's why I said disappointed.
What do you mean?
Like, you don't feel contempt, you just feel disappointed. You can just repackage the same feeling.
Betrayed.
Yeah,
I
betrayed
think is the
and
word
disappointed.
I mean, betrayal, alludes to a hurt. Which I do.
Which is a hurt, yes.
I do feel hurt. And now I feel like I'm just being a sook on a microphone being like, I'm hurt. But I am
too.
Hurt. Yeah, I feel, yes.
And by doing kind of this podcast and critiquing an industry that we have been part of, and in many ways, well, in some ways, I wouldn't say many, some ways we still love, are we forever going to be on the outside? Is this have we drawn a kind of a line in the sand and said, or will we be at one point going, let us back in.
I mean, you say like the industry we love or don't like. Like, I do love it. I love journalism. I love a lot of people who work in the industry. Like, they're my friends. They're my colleagues. I have respect for a lot of people who work in the industry. I think there's still a lot of good work that gets done in the industry. Yeah. And I would be terrified if, public interest journalism was to fray and dissolve into nothing. Like, that is a terrifying prospect. I don't want that. I really don't. And like, in terms of like, do we want to be let back in? I don't think we've ever really left, to be honest. Like, a journo is always going to be a journo. But the question is, if you piss off enough people, who's going to turn around and be like, you know who we should hire? That lady that called me a dumb cunt on the air. Like, not that I've ever done that.
But there's still time. There is still time, Jan. Look, it's not it's not just obviously the coverage of Gaza. It's that the industry has changed in the past 10 years in ways that none of us could ever have prepared for. In that, when we studied journalism, you still thought you were maybe going to be a radio journalist. You chose your medium. So you're going to be a print journalist. You were going to be a television journalist. Then social media happened, and audiences' eyes are not on television anymore. Audience trust has been obliterated. So it's not just the coverage of Gaza. It's within this ecosystem of enormous change. Many of the business models of journalism are struggling to work. Like, the latest trust barometer, which has been carried out for about 20 years all around the world, found 37% of Australians say they trust the media in 2025.
Right.
And in 2021, it was 51%.
Okay, well.
And we are amongst, of the 28 countries, one of the most distrustful of the media, only beaten by the UK and Japan. More Australians access their news on social media than they do TV, particularly 18 to 24-year-olds. Most get their news from TikTok.
Yeah.
So it's not only that we're a bit disillusioned with the coverage of the unfolding genocide. It's also that, well, audiences' eyes are elsewhere. The way in which people want to get their content is different.
Yeah.
And so I think that is also a big part of why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, not only that, but the scaffolding is there now in a way that it probably wasn't there 5 years ago, really. What I mean by that is, you know, it's slightly more normalized now to be able to make money via subscription mechanism.
Yeah.
Like Substack and Ghost and Patreon and all of these platforms, you know, exist and are increasing in popularity, for example. And because audiences have moved, again, there's this increasing normalization for audiences to want to connect with individuals,
Yeah.
for better or for worse. And there's a lot that we can say about it, you know, not being a great thing that suddenly any individual gets to say any old thing on the internet and have, you know,
Yes.
following that they influence.
And individuals in this trust barometer report, individuals are more trusted than media and government. So you're more likely to turn to somebody you trust, either in your family or somebody you connect with online, and believe what they say, which is power and a privilege, but also terrifying if that individual is a crackpot.
Yes. The jury's still out as to where we're at on that spectrum. I don't think we're crackpots, but, you know, like, we are individuals, and we try as much as possible to be factual and to be accurate, and honestly,
To be fair.
to be fair.
Yeah.
To be fair. And I have to say, a lot of that training has come from working
Legacy
in
media.
journalism.
Yeah.
It really has. Like, that's where we learn how to get sources correct. That's where we learn how to frame things. That's where we learn actually what being fair sort of looks like. That's where we learn how to write with a degree of clarity. That's where we learn where the angles are, like exactly
Yeah.
what the story is. I mean, there's a lot that we've learnt from coming up through legacy media that we've
Absolutely.
retained because it's meaningful.
And we're also applying that training and that lens to some of that current storytelling and going, hold a second, if this was a like first year journalism assessment, that particular article would flunk in the way in which facts have been used, in the way in which deference has been given to the perpetrator, in the way
Right.
victims aren't being given a voice. Like, there are so many of, we talk about the pub test, it wouldn't pass the basic journalistic test. And it's those same things that we have been trained in and we have applied to every other story
Yeah.
throughout our many years career.
Do you want to know the honest truth, though? Like,
Sure.
a lot of times I just think, like, who the fuck are we to tell people how to do anything? I have that thought more often than you would think, right?
Really?
Yeah, I do. Because I'm not an expert.
I mean, you're someone with a lot of experience.
Well, I'm certain, like, yes, I'm an expert in the sense that there are people who are not and have never been journalists, and I definitely know more than them. But, like, I'm not Australia's #1 expert on journalism. So where do I get the chutzpah, frankly, or the authority to be able to tell people how to do their jobs? And the way that I've reflected on that, and I think what maybe separates us from, you know, I guess legacy media, if I'm putting in inverted commas. And like, feel free to tell me that I'm wrong on this, but I do always just keep coming back to it, is that we just see Palestinian people as human beings, as fully fledged human beings who are the same as us. Their humanity is the same as ours. And so when I critique a piece of journalism, I often do it from that lens of, this is a dehumanizing piece of journalism. It erases Palestinians. It ignores Palestinians. It privileges their oppressors. It is, you know, sanitizing and rote. It's all of these things.
I agree with all of that, but I also think you're underestimating that what you have when you say, who am I? Who am I? Well, I think you have, and you'll know this because we get our peers in our DMs.
Right.
You are braver to stand behind your convictions and your beliefs and your training. And in part, that is, I mean, it's not training, it's just humanity, seeing Palestinians as humans. I don't think that that is exclusive to you, but I think you're willing to withstand what we know will come your way for humanising Palestinians, for questioning their oppressors, for questioning our government's inactions. It's your bravery and your clarity in the face of what you know will come your way that sets you apart from your peers. And that, I think, gives you the standing that you deserve.
Ooh, that's nice.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, that feels like I even...
Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
about how brave I am. Yeah.
Because we have people coming into our DMs going, I'm the homepage editor of this website, or, of this big news site. You wouldn't believe what I have to put up with. You wouldn't believe what they say, the hoops I have to jump through. So many in our industry agree with us. They do. And they're terrified and they're mortified.
Yeah. I just wish that somebody else did this. Do you know what I mean?
And we could be messaging them going, keep going, keep going.
I wish that they were this person and that, in fact, I was in their DMs because I would feel less stressed.
Okay. Can I tell you what's really stressing me out in my DMs?
Yeah.
So many beautiful young journalists, most of whom are from culturally diverse background, First Nations, Arab and various other backgrounds, will message me and say, I've just finished my degree, or this contract has finished, and can you give me some guidance or support on how to get a job, or I really look up to you, and what should I do? And I don't actually know how to answer them. Once upon a time I would make some phone calls, I would meet with them. I always did my best to try and mentor and nurture the next generation. But I'm actually at a point where I'm so paralyzed and I'm so disillusioned that I don't feel comfortable sending them to any organization, feeling that they will be cultivated, feeling that they will be supported, feeling that they have the prospects of success.
So what do you say to them when they reach out and ask you?
Sometimes I re-put it to unread and then have a cry.
Oh my God.
Because I started Media Diversity Australia. I was the co-founder about 8 years ago, in which I believed in a mission to help make our media more culturally and linguistically diverse, and that you would just, bring people in, and they've got mentorship programs, and then they've got some leadership programs. I don't know if I believe in that mission anymore. Oh. I don't know if I believe.
Hang on. That's what?
Well,
what do you mean when you say you don't know if you believe in that mission anymore?
I mean, in some ways, and I never thought I would say this, I'm in agreement with Donald Trump that this whole diversity, equity and inclusion stuff is bullshit. Not for the same reasons he thinks is bullshit.
Okay.
Not for the same reasons he thinks it's bullshit. He thinks it's bullshit to even fucking try, because you go woke, you go broke. I think it's bullshit because it gives corporates and organisations a get out of jail free card to pretend they care, to pretend that power will shift, to pretend that they really want different perspectives. And I mean, I was the co-founder of Media Diversity Australia, who wrote a book about power and change, and then look what the hell happened to me at the ABC, which bangs the diversity drum louder than any others. And so I think the way in which it is being rolled out and very superficially and tokenistically embraced actually does more harm to diverse people within organisations than helps them. And so I'm having this, crisis on a daily basis going, but do I believe in it? But I kind of started it. And now what do I say to these people?
Right.
And was I wrong then, or am I wrong now? I don't know. But it's definitely making me reflect and, yeah.
Oh, God.
So don't come to me for career advice. It's the long and the short.
I mean, this really is an existential crisis. Like that, it is for you, because you staked your kind of claim on this one particular thing that has been shattered in the worst possible way for you.
Look, and
I think you're right to be questioning it.
Yeah,
frankly.
and look, I did move away from that organisation 2 years ago, and there are some great people still doing work there. So please, I do not in any way, shape or form want anybody who's been the recipient of a scholarship or a mentorship program or a leadership program or the research. We did some really good research. I've kind of zoomed out and trying to look at where we're at. And the way in which my diversity was weaponized, the way in which I was seen as a problem, and a way that we just discussed earlier, the way in which we are as Arabs just suspect in this news environment just makes me think, well, what has been achieved other than putting a clearer target on our backs? I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard.
I think diversity in media feels like we could have a very extended conversation specifically about that. And my hunch is that we will down the track. I want to expand on this a lot more.
I do just one quick shout out before we move on.
Yeah.
First Nations journalists have long been having this conversation. And some, shout out to Amy McQuire and who wrote Black Witness, has talked about the need for independent First Nations-led media organisations because of the abject failure of legacy media to humanise Black stories or to give it prominence, to care about Black lives. And so I feel like, I'm having this reckoning that many First Nations journalists have long had before.
Yes.
And probably arrived at a similar conclusion.
Well, it's no coincidence then that if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see that we have an array of books.
Yes, and one of which is Black Witness by Amy McQuire.
Yes. Didn't intend to do a book recommend on this episode, but Black Witness by Amy McQuire is definitely worth reading, for sure.
So I guess it's fair to say that all of those points combined led us to think, well, we don't want to exit the media landscape in its entirety. Our voices still matter. Our perspectives still matter. And I felt that we had no other real choice than to go independent if we wanted to be able to report and critique in a way that felt morally, professionally right.
Also, some people just can't shut the fuck up. And
I wish I was a dumb bitch. Like a dumb bitch who could talk about spray tans and other stuff, but I can't.
I mean,
I've tried.
I've heard you talk about spray tans before. You have like strong dumb bitch vibes in other aspects of your life. Believe me. Please don't
But these dumb bitch vibes are stronger.
But don't try and sell yourself as any kind of public intellectual, Antoinette Latu. I know the truth. There is, so yes, all of those things. It just felt like the next natural progression for us because we had been moving more and more in this direction. But as I say, like some people are just, they have to have an opinion. And I am sadly one of those people. Yeah. Unfortunately, I have opinions on many, many things.
Yeah.
And I think if you are, if you give a fuck about journalism as I do, and if you feel like you genuinely want to critique the media, you do need a bit of distance from it. You need to be able to kind of remove yourself a little bit so that you can look at it from the perspective of somebody that is not wholly on the inside. I think that makes it better.
I also wanted to test the theory that, people have bad news fatigue and we can't keep doing stories on the plight of Indigenous children. We can't keep doing stories about Gaza because, that story. One time I was told, I was about working at a commercial outlet when I pitched a story about Indigenous children. They were like, it's going to put people off their dinner. That's why we don't run that story. And we do want to talk about things that we think people care about. Well, we care about them. We hope you do too. And I guess we want to test that. Like the fact that I know it's early days, but we've been doing really well in the charts would suggest that there is a gap and people are hungry for this sort of honest analysis of media and politics, that when we're told, it's too hard, all those stories don't work, that, maybe we can prove that they do. Or I can start a podcast about spray tans and maths if all else fails. I got a backup plan. Do you have a backup plan, Jan?
Hell no. I'm just going to move to Bali, hopefully, and write the great Australian novel. That's my backup plan, which sounds even less attainable than becoming a media mogul.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I do think we're going to do a little spotlight on great work by others because contrary to popular belief, we are not only here to roast and seethe. Mainly, but not exclusively.
Yeah, we've got It's a No from me, but we've also got
It's a Yes from me.
Indeed. So what's a yes from you?
Okay, so I have loved, since we're speaking about independent media, seeing other independent media expand. So I did notice in the same week, Cheek Media, which is run by Hannah Ferguson, has started commissioning external writers. And she did a call out and, she had then posted another story saying she got over 300 submissions. So she started to publish other writers, which I think is great. I know I said we wouldn't talk about myself, but the first piece that she did commission was from some lawyers reflecting on what my case means for racial discrimination law and workplace law.
Actually, if I may correct, I do believe that there was a piece prior to that from a Lebanese Australian
that's right.
Journalist called Abby Dib.
That's right. Abby Dib, yes. Oh, so there were two pieces about me.
There were two and I think that one was also about you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So just to make sure we didn't want to talk about me again, there's two examples. But then also DeepCut News, our mates at DeepCut News, have commissioned Amy Ramikis, who's a former political journalist from the Guardian, now with the Australia Institute. She is now a contributing writer. So I'm really heartened to see the ecosystem grow. And obviously, if they're commissioning other people, it means they have a budget for it. So my yes is for independent media growing.
Okay, that's a big yes. My yes from me, and really I think this is just a bit of a podcast reco. And it was a podcast that I listened to at the weekend with a British journalist named Mona Chalabi. Oh, love Did you listen to that? Did you love it?
Oh my gosh, I loved it.
I know, I love her. So Mona's I guess she's a data journalist, but she's also an illustrator. And you might have seen her on Instagram, Mona Chalabi. That's her Instagram name. That's where you can find her. But she does a lot of kind of like data journalism using illustrations, and she's got 500,000 followers, and she's really, really great. Won a Pulitzer, all of the rest of that. Anyway, she did an interview with a podcast called Real Talk.
Middle East Eye.
Yeah, I don't know if it was strictly Middle East Eye, but if you...
It is. It's part of Middle East Eye, Real Talk.
Oh, there you go. It's part of Middle East Eye. A podcast called Real Talk, where she was just talking a lot about some of the issues that we talk about, frankly, which does seem a bit navel-gazing and myopic. However, it just made me realise that actually...
We are right.
Yes, I love having that thought. But also that we're not alone,
yes,
to be honest.
That's what I meant to say.
That's the other one, where it's like, okay, this is happening with other people in other parts of the world as well.
Yes.
The issues are the same.
Yes.
The frustrations are the same. And she's just so articulate and great that I really just enjoyed listening to her talk about it. And I would very, very strongly recommend that episode. Real Talk is the podcast, part of Middle East Eye apparently, and it is an interview with data journalist Mona Chalabi. That's my shout out.
Okay, well, that is it for this week. Thanks for listening to We Used to Be Journos. Before you go, though, we'd love you if you could share this episode with someone you think might be eager to hear it, even if they don't want to necessarily hear it, tell them they should. You can also hit follow so that our podcast just pops into your feed if you're listening to this.
Yes, please do that. That is very, very helpful. And also rate and review because that helps us with the visibility of this podcast. Like I said, we've been number one in the news category for a month, and we want to stay there.
Yeah, and I love reading your reviews. If you're watching on YouTube, also hit subscribe. We've got a heap of people watching on YouTube, but not as many that are subscribing. So we would love for you to stay on this journey with us. We Used to Be Journos is part of Et Media, which is our new independent media company, and we can only keep doing this work with your support. So head to our website and you can subscribe, and that will keep us going.
Yes, that is etmedia.com. Incredibly, incredibly helpful if you were to... I was going to say sponsor the podcast. If you're a brand, you can. Yeah. But if you're just a person, any kind of contribution that you can make, it goes so far and helps us to continue making this podcast with our incredibly small team. That said, thank you to everyone who works on this podcast. You, me, but also our composer, Jai Pine, who does our opening track and our closing track, which you should be hearing in your ear right now.
And our unofficial researchers, the Edarati Dibidobbers. Please keep your tips coming. We love it. We love you. Catch you next week.